I'm Victor Foulk. I'm the Vice President of Emerging Technologies at CGI Federal, and I have the honor of sitting with you, Jim Cook, Strategic Engagement Executive at ACT-IAC, and the Chair for the Institute for Innovation. Thanks for taking the time to sit down with me today.
Thanks for inviting me, Victor. I'm glad to be here.
So I think we should start with a little bit of an introduction into your background and who you are before we talk about the Institute. So why don't you give us an introduction into you?
Okay, well, so over the last 40 years, I've actually had an opportunity to kind of work through this community, this IT community, in three different roles. First, as a user, where I led programs that actually use technology to deliver customer missions. Back in those days, we called it facilities management. Now we would call it outsourcing. And then I moved into consulting, helping agencies understand how to adopt technology. In the last 18 and a half years of my career, I spent it in the research world working for MITRE Corporation, and then doing some partnership work and government relations and policy work.
Excellent. So very steeped in the entire world, the ecosystem of innovation. So how does that translate into your current role as the chair for the Institute for Innovation?
Well, so when I retired from MITRE a year ago and went out on my own, one organization that I have been involved with heavily over the last 25 years is ACT-IAC, the American Council for Technology, and its Industry Advisory Council. And regardless of where I was in my career, I always found ACT-IAC as a key place to come to connect to government folks, other partners and collaborators and colleagues in industry. And so when I had the additional time being out on my own, I was really anxious to continue to contribute to this community in some more meaningful way. I've been the chair for the Institute for Innovation for the last 5 years, so I continue in that role. But the ACT-IAC CEO, Dave Wintergren, asked me to spend a little bit more time with he and his team and really focus on the strategic engagement work that they do across this community.
Excellent. So I think that's an excellent segue into the Institute itself. So can you give a little bit of depth and color to what the Institute for Innovation is? And you mentioned that it has been around for 5 years, but you're going through a significant reboot. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit as well.
Right. Well, and actually, so the Institute's been around for almost 12 years. At the time it was created, I don't know that there was many federal agencies that I worked with that formally had anything like a chief innovation officer or an office of innovation. So it was very early to some degree in the conversation around innovation. So the Institute was created as a place to bring government and innovators from industry and academia together to talk about how to build a culture of innovation. Now, fast forward, one of the reasons we're rebooting the Institute is because the government's in a very different place today. There's innovation, not just pockets of innovation, but critical mass of innovation all across the federal government. Again, likewise, I don't know that there's a federal agency I know of today that doesn't have a chief innovation officer or an office of innovation or has spun up an innovation center to some degree. So now our focus with the Institute is really helping the government and the innovators bridge that valley of death. There's still a challenge in the federal government, as you well know, in creating the on-ramp to get innovation into the agencies and really do full-scale adoption. And so part of what we're trying to do through this new strategy with the Institute is focus on doing innovation and helping government do it faster than they've been perhaps able to do it by focusing on some of the barriers that exist today, and not so much on the technology, but on the barriers to doing innovation at any large scale.
I love that you highlight the barriers, right? So I've spent 20 years in the federal government myself before coming to CGI. And I can tell you from experience, there's no shortage of innovation and there's no shortage of innovators within the federal government. The challenge has always been, how do those innovators find a successful, coalescing of a plan and achieve a result, right? And so when you talk about lowering the barriers, can you talk a little bit more about what the Institute does and how you achieve that collaboration with government to take those innovators and that innovation and deliver successful outcomes?
Sure. Well, and there's, you're hitting directly on some of the key elements and the key work streams in our new strategy. First of all, you have to know where the innovation exists. Outside of government, inside of government, so that A, you can learn from it, B, you can take advantage of it. And so big part of what we're doing is going to double down on some of these connection opportunities where we're creating forums where innovators can come in and share the innovation and the innovation story around things that they've done, whether that's somebody from government or somebody from the private sector. We also are going to be looking at some of the barriers around policy. Policy can be an enabler, it can also be a barrier. A firm believer in the fact that I think policy can be an accelerator for innovation. It's not something that should be ignored. I know there are many that believe that the last thing you want to do is put an innovator and a policymaker in the same room together because that's naturally going to stymie the creativity. But I don't think that's necessarily the case. And I think there is a place for both conversations in the innovation life cycle. And so we're going to focus some on that. And then we want to do a particular focus on research and development. Because, again, from your personal experience and professional experience, you know that getting things out of the research world and off the bench into practice and then into full-scale adoption continues to be a challenge. And so we're going to be creating a forum and giving not just researchers the opportunity to learn early in the research cycle what matters to government, using the government's learning agendas, and then creating visibility on ongoing research for the government so that they can identify opportunities to take relevant research and put it into practice, at least in demonstration pilots. And so what we're really trying to do is build that bridge across that valley of death and narrow that cycle and help government accelerate innovation.
Very good. I love that. So going back to the policy piece for just a minute, how do you view the process of incentivizing policymakers to be more agile when developing the policy? You talked about putting an innovator and a policymaker in the room together, right? That's a phenomenal idea, right? But each of them is acting in accordance with their motivations, their incentives, right? So how do we incentivize policy to be more flexible, to empower innovation as a precursor to enabling all the other work about bridging the valley of death?
I'm going to turn that around a little bit because I'm not so sure that it's about incentives. I think it's about informing.
Okay.
Most of the folks that I know that work in the policy world want to do the right thing, but they're concerned about the unknowns, right? The saying, "I don't know what I don't know, and that's what scares me." And so policy becomes the tool to manage the unknowns, and that can provide unnecessary regulation. But the more policymakers understand what the technology or the solution or the method can do, and the more you can explain how that delivers a positive outcome that matters to them, now you turn the conversation towards, okay, so what can you do from a policy perspective that can help me deliver this outcome that you care about? And I think I've seen instances where that has worked. I believe that there is much more that can be done in that area. I think whether you're talking about some of the unintended consequences behind some of the technologies that we deal with today, AI, of course, is the big one, but quantum is coming fast. And so we need to be having the conversations now so that there's awareness on both sides. What matters to policymakers, what matters to the folks who are doing the innovation and applying the innovation, and that they're working towards the same outcome together. I think there's big opportunities to do that, and that's one of the things that we're going to try to contribute to.
And I think the sharing of information more broadly, making sure that you have more stakeholders at the table and more diverse opinions, contributes to that risk mitigation as well.
Right, exactly. I mean, I had a conversation a little over a year ago with a former congressman who was very technology savvy, and I asked him, if you knew then what you know today about social media, would you have approached it different from a policy perspective? And he said, absolutely, because we would have had at least the opportunity to think about the unintended consequences. And so now now what happens is once the cat's out of the bag and these consequences become real, now you have the overcorrection. Right. And that's nobody wants to see that either. So that doesn't do a service to anyone. So again, I think it's really to everybody's interest to get these groups talking together early in the process of technology development and innovation in order to make sure that what comes out the other end is usable and practical and will deliver positive benefits.
So the mission of the Institute is phenomenal. and clearly you're the right person at the helm. Now, you talked a lot about what you're going to achieve. How do you measure success? Because this is not a new area. These are not new challenges, right?
Right.
With this bold mission, how do you actually quantify or qualify success? What does that look like? What are the KPIs? How do you define it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and there's so many different areas that focus areas in our strategy right now. There's probably discrete measures of success in each one of them, whether you're talking about creating connections and networks, whether you're talking about research and development or policy, or even developing products and tools that the government can then take ownership and use that facilitates innovation. So there'll be discrete ones, but I think the overarching metric for me is adoption. Is if what we do matters, then people will use it, and they'll call it their own. And there's some of that already in the Institute's history, where there's things that we have tackled and produced in conjunction with our government partners in ACT-IAC that the government has then adopted, put into practice, and they now call it their own. In fact, you can find it on their websites. That's, to me, that's the ideal measure of success. That's the ultimate measure of success. So as we look at each one of these focus areas and develop the programs and the projects and begin to execute, at the end of the day, it's all about eventually doing something that matters and government is willing to adopt it, put it into practice.
So you mentioned the collaboration between the Institute, between government and industry. So can you walk me through a little bit of detail around how industry partners with you? What's the method? What's the process?
So there's a couple of different ways, and first and foremost, it's within the Institute itself. The Institute doesn't run without the companies who are members or sponsors of the Institute. Of course, CGI is a big one, and we're really grateful that you're on the team, invested in the Institute, and you personally are serving on the board. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to work with you. But CGI and the other companies, really the diverse group that we've put together that have stepped forward, really are going to be the folks that make this thing go. And so that's one way to engage. And of course, you all are already doing that. But then the next level is as we launch projects, we will be going out to the ACT-IAC community for volunteers, because it is largely a volunteer organization, as you know, and we love to have folks from across the diverse group of membership companies and government agencies that participate work with us on the projects that we launch. There'll be opportunities for some companies to step in and sponsor projects and serve as the project leader. And so, again, I can give you an example of sort of the model that I'm using for this that we did successfully in the acquisition space in a minute, but that's another way to participate. And then as we host events and forums, we're going to be reaching out not just to IAC member companies, but part of the role of the Institute is to reach beyond the ACT-IAC membership, which is large and diverse, into the broader innovation ecosystem and engage organizations and people that might not otherwise be actively participating in this government space. And so there'll be opportunities to reach into other companies, other types of organizations, and have them on panels, to have them come in and present things that they're doing that might be relevant, engaging with us on research. So that's another way in which that we look to engage industry. In particular, on the innovation forums that we're going to be running, we're going to be looking for companies and people that are doing innovative things, and we want them to come in and present their innovation, not in a marketing sense, but as a case study, right? Here's what I've done, it's innovative, here's why it's innovative, here's how I've approached it, and here's what we can learn from that and potentially leverage from that. So there'll be plenty of opportunities to do that. And then I guess the last way I would say that industry can participate is for those that are members, come to our conferences, come to the ACT-IAC conferences, share what you're doing. We are absorbing all of this right now in the Institute, and we have a mechanism to identify and track companies and people that are doing innovative things, and we're going to be tapping them to come and participate in our programs.
Excellent. So you did mention that that we are working together, and I got to say that CGI is absolutely excited to be a partner, both in contributing to the Institute for Innovation as well as a longstanding member of ACT-IAC in partnership with the broader mission. And we do that, it's not only altruistic. We are very much committed to the mission of the Institute, the mission of ACT-IAC in general. We're also committed to the mission of our government partners, right? CGI gets an incredible amount of value out of this. When we participate in organizations such as yours, we get to participate in a broad and diverse ecosystem of innovative partners solving really complex challenges and working in ways that we wouldn't otherwise get to work. So we get a lot of value out of that. We also get to dovetail our own innovation programs, as you've mentioned. We get to dovetail our own emerging technologies practice that I head up for CGI Federal as an example, with the broader innovation ecosystem that you're bringing to the table so that we can share what we are doing with industry and government, but we can also take in what's being shared, right? So it's a very robust mutual value exchange, and we're very honored to be a part of it. Can you go into a little bit more detail when you talk about industry being, active partners, right? Can you talk a little bit more about the value of partnership and what the industry gets out of it?
So I think there's a few things that I would highlight there. And you've touched on some of this already just in explaining the value proposition for you and for CGI. And that none of us operate in a vacuum. And so there's always something we can learn from others. And the fact that this forum that ACT-IAC creates is a safe forum. I like to say it's a safe forum for government to engage with industry, but it's also a safe forum for industry to engage with industry in a non-competitive way. There's plenty of challenges out there for everybody to tackle. And the more that you can learn from others and find synergy with what others are doing, I think that's to everybody's benefit, and ultimately it's to the government's benefit because it impacts the entire market. And so I think the value proposition for industry to participate in these activities in a very open, transparent, collaborative way is the networks that the people create of their peers around industry or this market, but also what you learn from each other and what you can apply in your own instances, in your own work. And then I'd say related to that is that industry participants gain a great deal of insight from the government participation in these forums as well, because it is the type of environment where they can engage in an open, transparent way. The description probably doesn't do justice to the degree of value that really, I think, comes from this, other than to say that when you look around at the people that you engage with who are part of the ACT-IAC network and by extension the Institute for Innovation, there's a lot of people that have been doing this and engaged in this community for 20 years plus. I'm not the only one. There's some that even predate me. So that says something about the value that they get from the relationships that they form, what they learn, the insights that they gain, and the partnerships that they're able to establish, and how that benefits them personally, professionally, and as a company.
Absolutely. There's no shortage of amazing partners to be found within this ecosystem in bringing like-minded organizations to bear to solve some government challenges. We see that the fruit of that labor quite readily. So let's take a little bit of a step back, and I kind of want to look forward. And when you take the current initiatives for the Institute and what you're tasked with right now, looking forward 2 years into the future, what's the headline that you mentioned, whether or not technology is being adopted, whether the solutions are being adopted is one of the KPIs, right? But at a little higher level, in a visionary sense, what's that headline that screams success for you?
One headline that jumps out to me is one that would highlight or I haven't written a specific headline, but it would be about the government, and that the public perception of government is that it is agile, innovative, creative, and responsive. And that is due in part to the government's participation in ACT-IAC and the contributions of the Institute for Innovation in being that nexus where government and innovators can work together to crack the code and figure out how to accelerate the pace of innovation and the adoption of innovation that benefits the government. So that's not a headline. That may be the first paragraph in the story. But so I'd have to write the headline, but that's the gist of it, right?
But I think
that to me is, if I can read something, an article or a GAO report 2 years from now that says that, I'd say that we made a difference. We did what we're here to do.
Excellent. And I think it's not a headline. It is a very well stated realization of the vision that we're going to achieve. So I'm excited to be a part of that.
I am too.
So let's think a little bit more near term.
Sure.
Right. 2 years out, we're going to have this conversation again. But in the nearer term, are there any upcoming events, any engagement opportunities for government and industry that you're excited about that you want to talk about?
So, I mean, just in general, I would say that, I'd put a plug out there for the upcoming Emerging Technology and Innovation Conference in May in Cambridge, Maryland. That's a great forum for connections being made between government, industry, and industry around innovation, because that's the theme of the conference. And we'll also be recognizing the top 3 innovators through this year's Innovation Awards. So I'd say if you have an opportunity, attend the conference. It's a great forum. If you haven't been there before, it's a great way to get immersed and understand how this community is thinking and working together to do innovative things. Then the next thing I would say is that some of the new forums that we intend to launch shortly after the conference, I'm really excited about the Innovation Forum. We're actually going to highlight some of the nominees for the Innovation Awards, but it's also an opportunity. We already have companies coming forward that have started to hear about this and said, I've got something I'd like to share. I've got a use case I'd like to share. So I'm excited about that because I think that's going to create some good buzz. And then I'm really excited about this Research and Development Forum, in part because it piggybacks on top of or complements something that OMB has already launched. Their evidence team has already launched to try to do some matchmaking and connect researchers to government organizations that are looking for answers to key questions in their learning agenda. And I think what we're going to be able to do with the Research Forum is help OMB just scale that up. And so I'm excited about that opportunity. And we have a new potential policy project that we're going to be working on that's taking some recommendations on that a community of experts in ACT-IAC have put together around the next version of the FATARA scorecard.
Excellent.
And so that's a very tangible project with a very clear audience, both within the administration and in Congress. And so I'm excited about launching that. So, this is a great time and a great opportunity that we have in front of us. And the government folks that we reach out to, they're anxious to get involved as well. So I think it's going to be a fun time and a busy time for all of us, and I'm looking forward to it.
That's an amazing lineup, and looks like it's going to be a great year. I got a foot stomp, the Emerging Tech Conference that's coming up. We're fortunate enough to be hosting a panel session during the upcoming conference on emerging tech use cases across government, and the lineup there is phenomenal. So definitely want a foot stomp. Anybody who has the opportunity at the end of mid-May to attend this conference, it's going to be a phenomenal opportunity to dive into innovation. And the Innovation Awards, I'm personally very excited about. I've had the fortune to have a little bit of insight into what some of the nominations are, and it's incredible the amount of innovation that is in fact going on across government and what's being recognized. So I'm really looking forward to seeing who the winners are going to be, and the upcoming forums on innovation and the R&D work are all going to be incredible. So are there any parting words you'd like to leave with the listeners?
No, again, I would just like to say I'm excited about this time. I'm excited about the opportunity to work with you and your CGI colleagues. Thank you for participating and walking this walk with us, and thank you personally for serving as a judge for these Innovation Awards. I'm glad to have you do that with me. And I look forward to all that we're going to be able to do together and with the rest of our members and partners in government and on our Institute for Innovation board. So stay tuned. We'll look forward to having an opportunity maybe to come back and talk with you about progress at a later date.
I'm looking forward to it. We'll talk then.
Thank you.